From an emperor so lost in love he handed his empire to her family, to a 400-pound general who danced for the court like a harmless clown, to an army that stopped dead on the road and refused to take one more step until the most beautiful woman in China was executed. This is the An Lushan Rebellion explained. A war so catastrophic that when it was over, the imperial census suggested 1 out of every 6 human beings on planet Earth was gone. And almost nobody in the West has ever even heard its name. Yeah, you heard me right. The deadliest war in history might not be World War II. It might be a love story. Let me show you how that math works. But let's rewind, because before the burning, China was living its absolute best life. The year is 740, and the Tang Dynasty is the greatest superpower on Earth. The capital, Chang'an, is the largest city in the world. 1 million people inside its walls. Persian merchants, Turkic horsemen, Japanese students, Indian monks, all crammed into one glittering grid of markets and palaces at the end of the Silk Road. Poetry is exploding. Trade is exploding. This isn't some dusty ancient kingdom. This is the center of human civilization. If you had to pick one place and one moment to be alive in the entire 8th century, it's here. And the man running it all? Emperor Xuanzong. And here's the thing. For most of his reign, he was genuinely great at the job. He slashed corruption, fixed the treasury, reformed the army, and presided over a golden age so bright the Chinese still talk about it. 40 years on the throne. The empire had maybe 50 million subjects and a tax registry that ran like a machine. The man was, no exaggeration, one of the most successful rulers in Chinese history. Was, past tense, 'cause then he met her. Her name was Guifei, and she is remembered as one of the 4 great beauties of Chinese history, a woman so stunning that, according to the saying, flowers were embarrassed to bloom in front of her. Small detail though. When Xuanzong met her, she was already married. To his own son. Yeah. The emperor took one look at his son's wife and decided that particular arrangement was a mistake he'd be correcting. He had the marriage quietly dissolved, parked her in a convent for a bit so it wouldn't look completely insane, and then brought her into his own palace. Sir, that is not a love story. That is an HR catastrophe with a dynasty attached. But here's the crazy part. It really did become a love story. The 60-year-old emperor fell for her completely. Obsessively. The man who used to read tax reports at dawn now spent his days composing music for her. When she wanted fresh lychees, which only grow 1,000 miles to the south, he set up a chain of galloping horse relays, riders killing horses under themselves, just so the fruit would land in her hands still sweet. That is the kind of logistics network you build to supply an army. He built it for a snack. And while the emperor was in love, somebody had to actually run the empire, so the jobs started flowing to her family. Cousins, sisters, uncles, everybody eats. And one cousin in particular, Yang Guozhong, clawed his way all the way up to chancellor, the most powerful minister in China. His qualifications? Excellent surname. That's the list. Remember that name, because that man's ego is about to cost 20 or 30 million lives. Now, enter the clown. His name was An Lushan, and he is one of the strangest figures in all of world history. Half Sogdian, half Turk, born way out on the northern frontier, he rose through the Tang army the hard way. And the sources describe a man of enormous, spectacular size. We're talking a belly so huge it reportedly sagged past his knees, a man the court records claim weighed over 300 pounds. And this giant frontier general had one absolutely lethal talent. He knew how to be underestimated. He'd waddle into the imperial court and play the fool. He danced. I'm serious. This enormous man would perform the Sogdian whirl, a spinning dance, light on his feet like a top, and the court would collapse laughing. The emperor adored him. Yang Guifei adored him so much she formally adopted him as her son. And I need you to sit with this image. There was an actual ceremony where this 300-pound general in his 40s was dressed in a giant baby costume and carried around the palace while everyone laughed. The most dangerous man in the empire, and they dressed him up as an infant and giggled. Cool, 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 cool. Nothing bad could possibly come from this. 'Cause here's what everyone was missing while they laughed. The Tang had made a fatal structural mistake. To guard their massive frontiers, they'd created regional supercommands, each with a professional army, and handed them to trusted generals. And lovable, harmless, dancing and Lushan had been handed 3 of them. Roughly 180,000 of the finest veteran troops in the empire, all answering to one man. Meanwhile, the armies near the capital had rotted into parade ground decoration. The empire's fist was on the frontier, and the frontier belonged to the clown. So why did he snap? The disrespect came in 3 flavors. Number 1, the old chancellor who'd kept him in check, a genuinely terrifying political operator named Li Linfu, died, and the leash died with him. Number 2, the new chancellor was Yang Guozhong, the empty-robed cousin, who saw An Lushan as a rival and started poking him, publicly accusing him of treason, over and over, trying to force the emperor to destroy him. And number 3, An Lushan could count. He knew exactly how many soldiers he had, and exactly how many the capital had. When a man like that gets told, "You're a traitor," enough times, eventually he shrugs and says, "Fine. You want a traitor? Here's your traitor." December 16th, 755. An Lushan mobilizes his armies and marches on the heartland, claiming he has secret orders to remove the corrupt chancellor. The frontier veterans slice through the soft interior garrisons like they aren't there. Within a month, he's taken Luoyang, the empire's second capital, and declared himself emperor of a brand new dynasty. The baby in the palace costume now has a throne, an army, and a crown. And now comes the part that turns a rebellion into an apocalypse. 'Cause the Tang could have won this thing early. Really. Between the rebels and Chang'an stood Tong Pass, a fortress choke point so strong that attacking it was suicide. The Tang armies dug in there, and the veteran generals all said the same thing. Do not come out. Hold the pass, let the rebellion rot, and it collapses on its own. It was working. But here's the kicker. Back in the capital, Chancellor Yang Guozhong got paranoid. Those generals sitting safely behind the pass with a giant army, what if they turned on him next? So he whispered to the emperor. And the emperor, the same man who'd once been the sharpest ruler alive, ordered his army to leave the fortress and attack. The generals wept. One was practically dragged to the battlefield. And in July of 756, the Tang's last great army marched out of an impregnable fortress, straight into a rebel trap in a narrow valley, and was annihilated. Tens of thousands of men, gone in a day. The pass fell, and the road to Chang'an, the greatest city on earth, was wide open. Nobody saw it coming. Everybody saw it coming. What followed was pure panic. The emperor, Yang Guifei, Yang Guozhong, and a column of imperial guards slipped out of the capital at dawn and ran southwest, leaving 1 million people behind to the rebels. And on that road, at a shabby little post station called Mawei, the whole love story came due. The guards were exhausted, starving, and furious. Every one of them knew exactly whose corruption had gutted the empire and whose stupidity had thrown away the army. And at Mawei Station, they mutinied. They hacked Chancellor Yang Guozhong to death on the road, and then they surrounded the emperor's own lodgings, spears out, and made the demand that gives me chills to this day. The chancellor's poison ran deeper than one man, they said. As long as she lives, the empire will never trust you. Kill Yang Guifei. Think about what's actually happening in this moment. The most powerful man on earth, the son of heaven, ruler of 50 million people, and his own bodyguards are telling him, "Your empire or your love. Choose." He begged. He argued. His advisors told him the truth, that the men would not march another step while she breathed. And in the end, the old emperor gave the order. His chief eunuch led Yang Guifei to a Buddhist shrine beside the road, and there, the most beautiful woman in China was strangled with a silk cord. She was 37. The soldiers inspected the body, knelt, and the column marched on. The emperor who had built lychee expresses for her rode away in silence, a hollowed-out old man. He would abdicate within weeks, replaced by his son, and spend his last years staring at paintings of her. That's the moment on the thumbnail. Kill her or die. It actually happened, at a nowhere post station on a dusty road, in the summer of 756. Real quick, if stories like this are your thing, hit that subscribe button. Agent Fox runs on classified history, and trust me, the file cabinet is deep. Okay, back to the apocalypse. 'Cause here's the thing. That's the moment everyone remembers, but the war was just getting started. It would burn for 7 more years. And what makes the An Lushan Rebellion almost darkly comic is that the rebels spent those years destroying themselves harder than the Tang ever could. Follow this chain with me. An Lushan, now rebel emperor, goes nearly blind, becomes paranoid and violently abusive, and in 757 is murdered in his own palace by his own son, An Qingshu. Then An Lushan's best general, Shi Siming, has An Qingshu executed and takes the rebel crown for himself. Then Shi Siming is murdered by his own son, Shi Chaoyi. 4 rebel emperors in 8 years, and not one of them died facing the enemy. Every single one was destroyed by his own people. Man, history really said no chill at all. Meanwhile, the Tang, desperate, did something empires only do when they're drowning. They called in outsiders. Uyghur horsemen from the northern steppes rode in as mercenary saviors, and their price was brutal. When the great eastern capital Luoyang was retaken, the Uyghurs were allowed to sack it. The city the Tang were saving was stripped to the bone by its own rescuers. Twice. That's the stage this war had reached. There were no good guys left. There was just fire and famine, and 8 years of armies marching back and forth across the richest farmland on the planet. And that brings us to the number, the one I opened with. Before the rebellion, the Tang census of 754 counted roughly 53 million people. After it ended in 763, the census could find fewer than 17 million, 36 million people, missing from the books. Now, and this is the part historians always skip when they want a clean, shocking headline, that does not mean 36 million corpses. The census system itself had collapsed. Refugees scattered, provinces stopped reporting, tax registers burned. Millions weren't dead, they were just invisible to a broken government. Serious modern estimates for actual deaths, from war, massacre, starvation, and disease, run from around 13 million up toward 30 million. But here's the perspective that should still break your brain. Even the cautious numbers make this one of the deadliest wars in all of human history, in a world whose entire population was maybe 200 million. Proportionally, nothing in the modern era comes close. One war, 13 centuries ago, that most people have never heard of, may have erased a bigger share of the human race than both world wars combined. So here's the question I genuinely can't stop chewing on, and I want your verdict in the comments. Who actually killed those millions? Was it An Lushan, the clown who lit the match? Was it Xuanzong, the great emperor who spent his final decade in love instead of in charge? Was it Yang Guozhong, whose ego threw away an unloseable position? Or, and be honest with yourself here, was it everyone who laughed at the fat man dancing because underestimating him was more comfortable than fearing him? Pick one. Defend it. I read every comment, and this one's going to start fights. 'Cause the aftermath is maybe the saddest part. The Tang dynasty technically won. It survived another 150 years. But it never, ever recovered. The frontier commands that had spawned An Lushan multiplied. Regional warlords kept their armies, and the Golden Empire spent its remaining century as a hollow shell, politely pretending its provinces still obeyed. The confident, open, cosmopolitan China of the early Tang, the one that welcomed the whole world down the Silk Road, curled inward and never fully came back. And the love story? It became China's most famous poem, the Song of Everlasting Sorrow. An emperor and his lost consort. Grief written so beautifully that 13 centuries later, students still memorize it. 20 million dead, and what survived was the poem. And that's the lesson that should follow you out of this video. The deadliest war in history didn't start with an evil mastermind or a grand ideology. It started with an aging man who wanted to be in love instead of at work, a mediocre cousin with a big title, and a court that laughed at exactly the wrong person. Golden ages don't usually get murdered. They get neglected to death. And if you think your century is immune to that, I have an 8th century census to show you. But I want to know what you think. Madman, lovesick emperor, jealous chancellor, or the laughing court? Drop your verdict in the comments. And if this story got its hooks in you, smash that like button, 'cause it genuinely tells YouTube to push forgotten history like this to more people, and this channel runs on it. Then subscribe, 'cause next time, I'm opening the file on the one enemy the Mongols could not beat. A boy who was sold in a slave market for a handful of silver, bought as a soldier, and rose to face the most unstoppable war machine in human history, the army that had erased Baghdad, at a dusty spring in Palestine called An Jalut. The Mongols had never lost a battle. Then they met the man they'd sold as a slave. You are not ready for that one. Now click the video right there, and I'll see you on the next mission.